Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Snuff by Terry Pratchett, Part 12. Vimes woke in damp and utter darkness, with sand under his cheek. Some parts of his body reported for duty, others protested that they had a note from their mother. After a while, little insistent clues evolved. There was the sound of surf, the chatter of people, and, for some reason, what sounded like the trumpeting of an elephant. At this point, something stuck a finger in one of his nostrils and pulled hard.
Upsy daisy, Mr. Policeman. Otherwise, you biggest pancake I ever seen. Upsy daisy, save goblins, big hero. Hurrah! Everybody get clapped.
It was a familiar voice, but it couldn't have been Stinky, because Vimes had seen the little goblin completely crushed. But Vimes tried to pull himself up anyway. And this was almost impossible because of the stinking, fishy, smelling debris that covered him like a shroud. He couldn't bring his arm around to swat whatever blasted thing it was that was still tugging at his nostril. But he did manage to at least raise himself enough to realize that there was a lot of debris on top of him. He could make out what seemed like the thump of an elephant's footfall, and in his state of comfortable hallucination wondered idly what an elephant was doing at the seaside, and how much care said elephant would take to avoid just another load of flotsam. Flotsam, Flotsam, flotsam. Floating wreckage of a ship or its cargo. Floating debris. Flotsam. And how much care said elephant would take to avoid just another load of flotsam. This thought crystallized just as the tugging at his nose stopped and the cracked voice shouted,
Rise and shine, Mr. Vimes, 'cause here come Jumbo.
Vimes managed the champion press-up of all time and sprang clear, dripping driftwood and barnacles, just as a foot the size of a dustbin thumped down where his head had been.
Hooray! No flattery for Mr. Vimes.
Vimes looked down and saw about half an inch from the family-sized toenail of the elephant, who incidentally now wore an expression of some embarrassment. The figure of Stinky bouncing up and down excitedly on the tip of its trunk. Other people had spotted Vimes too, and were hurrying toward him, and it was with a terrifying relief that he spotted the distinctive helmets of the Quirm City Watch, which he had always thought were far too fussy and militaristic for proper coppers, but now viewed as shiny beacons of sanity. An officer with a captain's helmet said,
Commander, are you all right? Everyone thought you'd been washed away.
Vimes tried to brush mud and sand off his torn shirt and managed to say, Well, the lads back in Ankh-Morpork gave me a bucket and spade for my holiday, so I thought I ought to try it out. Never mind about me. What about the fanny? What about the people?
All fine, sir, as far as we can tell. A few bangs and bruises, of course. It was amazing, sir. The men who look after the elephants at Quirm Zoo saw it happen. They take the creatures down to the surf in the morning to have a wash and a bit of a play before the crowds come along. And one said he saw the fanny go right over the top of the dock on the crest of the wave, sir, and it sort of settled down on the beach. I had a look inside, and I'd say she'll need a month or so in the boatyard, and the paddle wheels are smashed to blazes. But it'll be the talk of the river for years.
By now, an apologetic zookeeper was steering his charge away from Vimes, allowing him to see a beach covered in damp rubbish, and he was surprisingly pleased to note quite a large number of chickens scratching busily for worms. One of them, totally oblivious to Vimes, scratched at some seaweed for a moment, hunkered down with a cross-eyed expression, gurgled once or twice, and then stood up, looking rather relieved. He saw that it had left an egg on the sand. At least, he supposed it to be an egg. It was square. He picked it up and looked down at the chickens, and in his half-hallucinating state said, "Well, that definitely looks complicated to me." Out on the surf, the two oxen were standing nearly neck-deep in the water, and perhaps it was only his imagination that led Vimes to believe that the water around them was steaming. And now more people were running, and chickens were running away, and there was even 10 gallons and Mrs. Sillytoe with her daughter, looking damp, and with blankets around them, but most importantly, not looking dead. Vimes, who had been holding his breath for too long, breathed out. He breathed out even further when 10 gallons slapped him on the back, and Mrs. Sillytoe gave him a kiss. Mwah! "What about gastric?" he said. "And where's Feeny?" Mrs. Sillytoe smiled. "They're all fine, Commander Vimes, as far as we can tell. They're a bit battered, but sleeping it off. No long-term problems according to the medic. I'm sure they'll be fine, thanks to you." She stood back as a Quirmanian officer handed Vimes a mug of coffee. It had sand in it, but never had sandy coffee tasted better. "All sorted out very well, you might say, sir. We even made sure those damn goblins caught their boat." Never in the field of coffee making had so much of the stuff been sprayed so far and over so many. Vimes stared beyond the surf where, in the distance, a ship had left the port and was making good sail. He said, "Fetch me Acting Captain Haddock right now." Acting Captain Haddock arrived at a run 6 minutes later, and Vimes couldn't help noticing that he had a bit of breakfast around the edge of his mouth. "Our relationship with Commandant Fournier is cordial at the moment, is it not?" said Vimes. Haddock grinned widely. "Commander, when he gets down here, you may have to try hard to stop him kissing you on both cheeks. Mrs. Sillytoe is his daughter." "Was happy to be of assistance," said Vimes, looking around absently. "And so would you tell these gentlemen that I want a fast boat, one fast enough to catch that ship, and a decent squad of men to crew it, and I want them now. And while I'm waiting, I'd like someone to get me a clean shirt and a bacon sandwich, without a vec." "They have a pretty swift cutter, Commander, for chasing smugglers." "Good, and get me a cutlass. I've always wanted to try one." Vimes thought for a moment and added, "And make that another 2 bacon sandwiches, and a lot more coffee. And make that 1 more bacon sandwich, and Haddock, if you can scavenge a bottle of Merkel and stingbats,
Very famous old brown sauce. I swear I'll make you a full sergeant when your term here is up. 'Cause any man who can find a proper down and dirty Ankh-Morpork sauce in Quirm, home of 500 bloody types of mayonnaise, without getting his eye full of spit, deserves to be a sergeant in anybody's force.
And then, as whatever had been holding Sam Vimes up drained away, he fell gently backward, dreaming of bacon sandwiches and brown sauce. Even Constable Haddock, or as he was now, acting Captain Haddock, would agree that he was not the sharpest knife in the box. But it was amazing, the things you could open with a blunt instrument. As he hurried away on this prestigious errand, he was stopped by one of the Quirm officers, who said, "Harangue!" Footnote. Constable Haddock's immediate nickname when he joined the force was Kipper, because policemen's minds work that way. End footnote. As he hurried away on this prestigious errand, he was stopped by one of the Quirm officers, who said,
Harangue! Have you heard of a watchman called Petit Fou Arthur?
"We Mad Arthur?
Yes, he's one of our lads. Well, you had better come quickly, my friend, because he is in our watch house. Strong little fellow, isn't he? A few of the other officers had laughed at him, he said, but I believe that they have learned the error of their ways. The hard way, as it happened. Apparently, he has been sent to find Commandant Vimes."
Sam Vimes awoke from a pig's nightmare to find himself lying on a pile of sacks in a go-down in the docks. Go-down, a warehouse in a country of southern or eastern Asia. Go-down. Sam Vimes awoke from a pig's nightmare to find himself lying on a pile of sacks in a go-down in the docks. He was carefully lifted to his feet by acting Constable Haddock and led unsteadily to a crude table behind which was a chef presiding over the sizzling makings of a bacon sandwich, or rather, several bacon sandwiches.
"He screamed a bit," said Haddock, "when I insisted on no mayonnaise. But right now, you can do no wrong here, Commander. And I have one unopened bottle of Merkel and Stingbat's finest, sir. The only one in this city. I'm afraid, however, that you'll have to eat on the go. But the chef is packing the sandwiches in a hamper with hot charcoal to keep them warm. No time to hang about, sir. The cutter will leave the dock in 10 minutes.
A notebook was pushed under Vimes's nose.
"What's this?" "Your signature to my promotion to full sergeant, Commander," said Haddock carefully. "I hope you don't mind, but you did promise." "Good man," said Vimes. "Always write things down." Haddock looked proud. "I've also arranged to have on board a selection of cutlasses for your perusal, Commander."
Vimes struggled into his new shirt, and as his head appeared, he said,
"I want you to come too, Kipper. You know your way around here better than me. By the way, what did you do with the prisoner?"
Haddock said,
"What prisoner would that be, Commander?"
And for a moment, Vimes's blood froze.
"You didn't find a man tied up anywhere on the Fanny?"
Now Haddock looked worried.
"No, sir. No one by the time we got there. The place was a mess, sir. Sorry, sir. We didn't know." "No reason why you should have done. Sorry to shout. But if the Quirm police think the sun is shining out of my arse, then tell them they should be looking for a youngish-looking individual known as Stratford. He's a double murderer, at least. Vicious, and by now certainly armed. Tell them they'll be doing everybody a favour if they keep guard on the boat, on the walking wounded, and all the lads in your infirmary. And also, they should send a clacks to Sidopolis Yard right now to say that Commander Vimes requires that 2 members of the watch should hasten via Golem horse to Ramkin Hall to keep guard over Lady Sybil and young Sam. I don't want them to hang about. I know those things are bad news to ride, but Stratford is a nut job. They must hurry.
Excuse me, Commander, said one of the Quirm officers. We all speak pretty good Morporkian here. Everybody here speaks Morporkian. If you hear us speaking Quirmian, it's because we want to talk about you behind your back. We salute you, Commander Vimes. We will send your clacks in search everywhere for your murderer, and take great care of the wounded. Now, please hurry down to the dock. The Queen of Quirm is pretty ancient, only 1 step away from being a hulk. Our cutter should catch up with it in a few hours. Shall we go?
Come on, sir, said Haddock. And we, Mad Arthur, will brief you on the way. We, Mad Arthur? Yes, Commander. Apparently, he got sent to foreign parts to do with this goblin business, flew back to Ankh-Morpork, and then got sent straight here to you. He's got a story to tell you, and no mistake.
Where is he?
Said Vimes. They should be releasing him from custody right now, sir. A laughable misunderstanding. No real harm done. All will be forgiven, and all will probably heal, I'm sure.
Vimes was wise enough to leave it at that. Of course, the seasickness didn't help, but that didn't begin to cut in until afterward, when wee Mad Arthur had finished his breathless account.
And what did you find in the huts? Said Vimes.
More goblins, sir. All shapes and sizes. Little ones too. Most of them dead. The rest in a very bad way, in my opinion. I did what I could for them, such as it was. To tell ye the truth, sir, I think they were bewildered about everything. The poor wee devils. But there's grub and water there of a sort, and I don't reckon those guards are going to move in a hurry, you ken? He made a face and added, Really weird, those goblins. I let them out, and they all just milled around, not knowing what the hell to do. I mean, Crivens, if it were me, I'd be out of there like a shot and give those scunners a right good kicking in the fork while they was laying down. As for the men, well, I kenned this was urgent and I could always fly back tomorrow and pour some water on them at least. But I thought the watch should know, and so made haste back to Ankh-Morpork, and they told me where you'd gone on holiday, and Lady Sybil said you'd gone down that mucky old river. So all I had to do was fly down until I got to Quirm, and when I found a big awful terrible mess, I kenned that was something to do with you, Commander.
Wee Mad Arthur hesitated. He was never quite sure what Vimes thought of him, given that the man considered Feagles in general a nuisance. When Vimes was slow to reply, he asked, I hope I did what ye would have done, Commander. Vimes looked at wee Mad Arthur as if he was seeing him for the first time.
No, Constable, you did not do what I would have done, which is fortunate, because if you had, then you would be in front of me on a charge for using brutally excessive force in the execution of your duties. However, you will get a medal and an official commendation for this, Constable. Right now, we're chasing another ship that's taking more goblins to that wretched place. And although I imagine you must be very tired, I expect you'd like to come along for the ride. Incidentally, may I congratulate you personally, Constable, for someone raised as a gnome. You really have got the hang of the whole Feagle business, haven't you? You beat up a dozen armed men single-handed.
Oh, aye, sir, said wee Mad Arthur slyly. But it was nae fair. I had them outnumbered. Och! And by the way, in some of them sheds, there was all kinds of alchemy stuff.
Didn't ken what it was, but ye might find it interest.
Well spotted, said Vimes. Why don't you go down below and get a rest?
Aye, I will, sir. But as soon as I can, I have to run an errand regarding Sergeant Cullen, who is in a very bad way indeed. He looked at Vimes's blank expression and continued. Did ye nae know? He got some goblin gewgaw given to him, and it's put some kind of fluence on him quite cruel. And he's a screaming and a shouting and making oot like a goblin all day long, according to Sergeant Littlebottom. She's moved him into the sanatorium.
Sergeant Cullen?
Aye, sir. And according to Captain Angua, we have to find a goblin cave to break the fluence. You can? Sounds a wee bit weird to me. But half the watch is out searching the place for goblins, and they canna find even one of the poor wee beings, being as the wee beasties is hardly going to advertise these days, if you are getting my meaning. Once again, wee Mad Arthur looked at Vimes.
Sergeant Cullen?
That's what I told you, sir. The blood came back to Vimes's face as rational thought came back to his brain.
Can he travel?
Wee Mad Arthur shrugged. Ahead of them, the Queen of Quirm seemed a little closer.
Then, if you please, Constable, can you go back to the clacks at the Quirm Watch House and tell them to put Fred on a coach to Ramkin Hall as soon as possible, okay?
Vimes added.
Best if Sherry comes with him, I should think.
And in his head he added,
Fred Cullen! He hates anything non-human on the quiet.
And for now, he left it at that. Given what lay ahead, but thought,
Fred Cullen! I wonder what kind of pots he would make.
Behind him, wee Mad Arthur whistled a strange note, and a seagull, trailing the cutter in the vague hope of a free meal of fish entrails, found a weight on its back and a voice in its ear saying, Hello, beastie. My name is wee Mad Arthur. Vimes liked to have his feet on something solid, such as his boots, and he liked his boots to do likewise. The sail of the Queen of Quirm now clearly visible, the cutter left the safety off the harbour and hit what is generally known as a moderate swell. And Commander Vimes, the Duke of Ankh-Morpork, Sir Samuel Vimes, and not least Blackboard Monitor Vimes, was definitely going to eat his bacon sandwiches and not throw up in front of other watchmen. And he didn't. And didn't know how, although he did at one point think he detected, high in the rigging, the shape of a small goblin grinning down at him. He put it down to the bacon sandwiches, which were valiantly trying to come back up, just as he valiantly kept them down. Stratford would have got onto that damn hulk. He was sure of it. Damn sure of it. He would want paying, for one thing, and he wouldn't want hanging. Vimes hesitated. How sure of it should Vimes be? How much was he prepared to gamble on a hunch? It was Stratford, after all. He was smart and nasty, so you covered every angle, even though you knew that a smart man in a hurry could find a new angle for himself. And so, all the people who made up Sam Vimes walked backward and forward across the poop deck, or the scuppers, or the starboard, or whatever the damn slippery rocking wood he was standing on was called, veering between hope, nausea, despair, self-doubt, nausea and the thrill of the chase, and nausea, while the cutter seemed to hit the hard bits of every wave as it plunged onward after the Queen of Quirm and Justice. The lieutenant came up to him and saluted quite smartly and said,
Commander, you have asked us to pursue the ship because it is carrying goblins, but I know of no law against taking goblins anywhere.
There ought to be a law, because there certainly is a crime. Do you understand?
Said Vimes. He patted the lieutenant on the shoulder and continued.
Congratulations! This cutter of yours is actually traveling faster than the law, Lieutenant. The law will catch up. Goblins can speak. They have a society, and I've heard one of them play music that would make a bronze statue burst into tears. The process of modern policing is such that I'm certain that these have been taken from their home, and the ship that we're following is taking them somewhere where they don't want to go. Look, if you're queasy about it, just help me get on that ship and I'll sort things out by myself, okay? And besides, I believe our murderer could be on the boat as well. But it's up to you, Lieutenant.
Vimes nodded toward the prow and added,
We're so close I can see the faces of their crew. Maybe you should tell me your intentions, Lieutenant.
Vimes felt a little sorry for the lad, but not too much. He had taken the job. He had accepted the promotion and the money that went with it, hadn't he? Any copper worth his truncheon would at least take a look at the Queen now they'd come this far, wouldn't they?
Very well, Commander, said the lieutenant. I am not sure of my bearings, but we will hail the Queen and ask permission to come aboard.
No, you don't ask. You tell them to stand by to be inspected by the police. And if you're not concerned about the goblins, then it is a fact that I am in pursuit of a murderer,
Vimes added.
The capital crime. One that we can't ignore.
In fact, he could see the Queen was already heaving to. Footnote. Or 3 or 4, as far as Vimes the landlubber was concerned. End footnote. In fact, he could see the Queen was already heaving too. It was even hoisting a white flag, much to his surprise. And her captain was waiting for them as the cutter drew alongside. He had a look of resignation on his face and said,
We won't make any trouble, officers. I know it was a bloody stupid thing to do. We've got the man you're looking for, and we're bringing him up now. It's not like we're pirates after all. Good morning, Lieutenant Perdix. Sorry to put you to any trouble.
Vimes turned to the lieutenant. You know the captain?
Oh yes, Commander. Captain Murderer is well respected on this coast,
said the lieutenant as the cutter gently kissed the Queen.
Smugglers, of course, they all do it. It's a sort of game.
But Captain Murderer, said Vimes.
The lieutenant scrambled onto the Queen's deck with ease and gave Vimes a hand up, saying,
The Murderers are a highly respected family in these parts. To tell you the truth, Commander, I think they rather like the name. They'd object more to smuggler, I suspect. We are bringing the bloke up right now, Lieutenant, said the captain, and he ain't very happy.
Vimes looked him up and down and said,
I'm Commander Vimes, Ankh-Morpork City Watch, currently investigating at least 2 murders.
Captain Murderer's eyes shut, and he put a hand over his mouth for a moment before saying, in a voice weeping with forlorn hope,
That wouldn't be that, Commander Vimes, would it?
Captain Murderer, produce for me the man I'm after. Then I'm sure you'll find me on a friendly footing. Do you get my meaning?
There was some shouting and thumping down below, and several suggestions that somebody was getting kicked very hard. Eventually, a man with a cloth tied round his face as a blindfold was half pushed and half dragged up onto the deck.
To tell you the truth, I'll be glad to see the back of him, said the captain, turning away.
Vimes made sure the man was held fast by the sailors and pulled down the mask. He looked into bloodshot eyes for a moment and then very calmly said, "Lieutenant, will you please impound the Queen of Quirm and arrest the captain and first mate on a charge of kidnapping and possibly abduction of a number of persons, specifically Mr. Jethro Jefferson, also goblins to the number of 50 or more. There may be other charges."
You can't abduct goblins,
said Captain Murderer.
Goblins is cargo.
Vimes let this one pass for the moment. Captain Murderer would be orientated to the world as seen by Commander Vimes at Commander Vimes's leisure. For now, he said to the lieutenant, "I also suggest that you lock up the captain and first mate in the brig, if that is what it's called, because when Mr. Jefferson here has got his hands free, I think he's going to try to punch somebody's lights out. I'm sure this can all be sorted out, but someone's going to suffer for this, and it's just a matter of deciding who it's going to be." He thought for a moment and then countermanded, "No, I think that first I'll talk to the captain in the captain's quarters. Kipper, I'd like you to come and take notes. Lots of notes. Good to see you, Mr. Jefferson. Lieutenant, to the best of my knowledge, Mr. Jefferson is guilty of no crime other than being in possession of a hot temper. But although he's a man, I'm very glad to find he's not the bastard I'm currently looking for." It was, acting Captain Haddock thought, a good thing that he had a decent amount of room in his notebook. "Captain Murderer, let me recap," said Sam Vimes after a while, idly swiveling in the captain's chair. It squeaked. "Some men unknown to you, but whom you decided to treat with respect because they had the right password, which is to say, the password you used in your dealings with smugglers, with whom you have developed what I might call an understanding. Delivered to you a man, bound and gagged, and told you to take said man to her wonderland to, and I quote, cool his heels for a little while. And you have also told me that these men said to you that this was okay by the law." The swivel chair under Vimes squeaked once or twice as it twisted for dramatic effect, and he went on. "Captain Murderer, I represent the law in Ankh-Morpork, and you may be aware that a number of influential politicians throughout the world trust my judgment. And, Captain Murderer, I know of no law that makes kidnapping legal. But I'll ask my colleague and an expert on Quirmian law whether he knows of any local edict that makes it legal to tie up somebody who has committed no crime and drag him onto a boat and send him to a questionable, distant location against his will." The swivel chair only had one chance to squeak again before Lieutenant Perdix said ponderously, "Commander Vimes, I know of no such change in the law, and therefore, Captain Murderer, I arrest you." And here the lieutenant placed a hand on the stricken captain's shoulder. "On a charge of kidnapping
aiding and abetting kidnapping, actual and possible grievous bodily harm, and other charges that may arise in the course of our continued investigations. In the meantime, upon its return to port, the Queen of Quern is impounded and will, as you may be sure, be inspected down to its gunwales."
Vimes swiveled the chair again until his face was not visible to the downcast captain, but could be clearly seen by the lieutenant, then winked at him and got a little nod in response. He rotated the chair again and said, "Depriving an innocent man of his liberty, even for a week, Captain, is a very serious crime. However, the lieutenant has told me that you are well thought of on this coast and in general are considered to be a model citizen. Personally, I don't like a world in which small men who act out of fear or even out of a misguided deference get thrown into prison while big men, the instigators, if not the perpetrators of crime, get off totally free. I expect you don't like that world either, eh?" Captain Murderer stared down at his sea boots as if he was expecting them to explode or perhaps break into song. He managed to mutter, "You're right there, Commander." "Thank you, Captain. You're a man of the world. Right now, you need a friend, and I need names. I need the names of the people who got you into this mess. Now, Mr. Jefferson, the blacksmith, has told me that in all conscience he cannot say that he was particularly badly treated once he was in your illegal hospitality. Apparently, he was reasonably well fed, given beer and a daily tot of rum, and even provided with a number of back issues of the magazine Girls, Giggles and Garters to while away his time. He also wants names, Captain Murderer, and it may just be that if we have those names all put down legally in an affidavit, he might just be persuaded to forget his imprisonment in exchange for a certain sum of money to be negotiated and a chance to go hand to hand, fair and square, no holds barred, with your first mate, who he describes as a bag of shite, a nautical term which I don't pretend to understand. Apparently, said man took pleasure in thumping him when he objected to his imprisonment, and Mr. Jefferson would like, as it were, to settle the score." Vimes stood up and stretched his arms as if taking the cramp out of them. "Of course, Captain, this is all very irregular, especially since we have here our lieutenant, a decent, clean and upstanding young officer. But I suspect that if he brought the Queen into dock and you in front of the authorities on a smuggling charge, he might consider honour to be satisfied. It would be a bit of a knock for you, but not one half as bad as being an accessory to kidnapping. Don't you agree?" Vimes went on cheerfully. "The lieutenant here will have got a feather in his chapeau and may put in a bon mot on your behalf. I suspect, what with you being an otherwise upstanding and, above all, helpful citizen." Vimes winked at Lieutenant Perdee. "I'm teaching this young man bad habits, Captain, and so I suggest that you treat him as a friend, especially if at any time in the future he asks you any innocent questions to do with shipping movements and merchandise and other such concerns. It's up to you, Captain Murderer. I think you know names. The names, at least, of the men you deal with, and also the name of their employer. You want to tell me anything?" The boots shuffled.
Look, Commander, I don't want to become enemies with powerful men, if you know what I mean.
Vimes nodded and leaned forward so that he could look the man in the eyes.
Of course, I quite understand that, Captain, he said quietly, and that is why you should give me the names. The names, Captain. The names. Because, Captain Murderer, I understand you do not wish to upset influential men, and right now I have half a mind to have your ship impounded and destroyed because you were trafficking in living, breathing, intelligent creature, if somewhat grubby, sapient creatures. Strictly speaking, I would get into trouble for authorizing this, but who knows? The world can change quite quickly, and it's changing quickly for you. He slapped the captain on the back. Captain Murderer, here and now, I'd like you to think of me as a friend. And Vimes listened, and the red balls bounced across the bays, cannoning off the coloured balls, and the law was being broken wholesale for the purpose of upholding the law. How could you explain that to a lawyer? How could you explain that to a layman? How could you explain it to a lawyer? How could he explain it to himself? But it was all happening fast, and you got on top of it or perished. So you did your best and faced such music as anyone cared to play. The Queen of Quirm docked that day, 2.5 months earlier than expected, to the dismay, distress, or possibly even delight of the wives of the crew. The harbour master made a note of this, and also was intrigued by the fact that most of the crew, after disembarkation, immediately wandered along past the other ships in port to a quiet area of beach close to the repair yard, where the somewhat battered Wonderful Fanny was already being pulled up the slipway. Walking alongside his boat like a mother hen with one enormous chick was Captain Sillytoe, nursing a plaster cast on his arm. He brightened up when he saw Vimes.
Well, sir, I have to hand it to you, by my halibut, so I must. You played a man's job in getting us safely home, sir. I won't forget it, and nor will my wife and daughter.
Vimes looked up at the boat and hoped for the best.
She looks extremely battered to me, Captain. I mean the boat, not your wife, of course.
It appeared that the captain was determined on optimism.
We lost much of the gearing for the paddle wheels, but truth to tell, she was long overdue for refit in any case. But, my dear Commander, we rode a damn slam with all souls safe. And, moreover, what the seven hells are they doing?
Vimes had already heard the shrill notes of a flute, but he had to look down to see, marching resolutely across the beach, a large number of goblins. At their head, and for a moment appearing bright blue, was Stinky, playing an old and empty crab leg. As he passed Vimes, he stopped playing long enough to say,
"No seaside rock for goblins! Hooray! Home again, as fast as they can, in them watches, they applaud. And them what tries to stop, oh yes, Constable Stinky and his little chums. He finds Stinky will be worst nightmare.
Vimes laughed.
What? What do you mean? A goblin with a badge?
He had to walk fast as he said that, because Stinky was understandably dead set on getting the goblins out of there as soon as possible.
Stinky don't need no badges, fellow policeman. Stinky worst nightmare all by himself. Remember a little boy, open book, and he see evil goblin, and I see nasty little boy. Good for us, little boy, that we were both right.
Vimes watched them march away, speeding up until they reached the undergrowth at the edge of the dockyard, where they disappeared. And for a moment, it occurred to Vimes that even if he rushed forward and fished around for any trace of goblin, he would not find one. He was bewildered. This didn't matter very much. Bewilderment was often a copper's lot. His job was to make sense of the world, and there were times when he wished that the world would meet him halfway.
Are you feeling all right, Commander?
Vimes turned and looked at the serious face of Lieutenant Perdee.
Well, I'm not certain when I last slept properly, but at least I can stay standing up. And I have all the names and descriptions.
3 names and 1. Oh, what a name that was. That is, if you trusted the word of someone happy to be called Captain Murderer. Well, the man was in his 50s. Not a good age to have to run and hide. No, Murderer was not going to be a problem, nor was Jefferson. Idiot firebrand though he was. What Jefferson had suspected, Captain Murderer knew. But Vimes, on the other hand, hadn't demanded the chance to take a crack at the Queen's first mate. Admittedly, an unpleasant-looking cove with a chin like a butcher's boot. He was swaggering toward them now, with the apprehensive Captain Murderer fussing along behind him. Vimes strolled up to the blacksmith, who seemed no worse for his impromptu voyage.
Come on, sir. Murderer will pay you whatever it takes to keep the lieutenant happy and keep his own boat. Chalk it up to experience, eh?
There's still that bloody first mate, said the blacksmith. The rest of the crew was civil enough, but he's a bullying bastard.
Well, said Vimes, here he is, and so are you. It's man to man, and I'll stay here to see fair play. It's an interesting day here. We're trying a different kind of law, one that's quick and doesn't have to trouble any lawyers. So go on. He knows what you want, and so do you, Mr. Jefferson.
Other crewmen were congregating at this end of the beach. Vimes looked from face to face, all showing the working man's intuition that a good bit of healthy violence might cheerfully be expected, and read the unspoken language. The first mate did look like a man who made a lot of use of his fists and his temper, and so, Vimes thought, there would probably be many among the crew who would like to see him given a little lesson, or even a great big one. He beckoned both the men toward him.
Gentlemen, this is a grudge match. You both know this score. If I see a knife, may the gods help him who holds it. There is to be no murder here. Saving you, of course, Captain, and in front of you all. I give my word that I'll stop the fight when I deem that one man has definitely had enough. Gentlemen, over to you."
And with this, he stood back smartly. Neither man moved, but Jefferson said,
"Do you know the Marquis of Fantala rules devised for the proper conduct for a bout of fisticuffs?"
The first mate's smile was evil. He said,
"Yes, I do."
Vimes didn't see, not actually see with his own eyes, what happened next. Surely no one could. But it was agreed later that Jefferson had spun around in a blur and laid the sailor flat. The sound of his heavy body thumping down on the sand was all that broke the silence. After 1 second, Jefferson, massaging some blood back into his fist, looked down at the fallen giant and said,
"I don't."
He turned and looked at Vimes.
"You know, he deliberately pissed on the goblins in the hold. Bastard."
Vimes tensed in case the fallen man had chums without a sense of humor, but in fact there was laughter. After all, a big man had gone down heavy right enough, bang to rights, and that was a definite result in anybody's money.
"Well done, Mr. Jefferson. A fair fight if I ever saw one. Perhaps these gentlemen will take the first mate back to his ship for a lie down."
Vimes delivered this as an instruction, which was instantly obeyed as one, but he added,
"If that's all right by you, Captain Murderer."
"Good. And now I think that you and I'll go in an entirely friendly way, along with the lieutenant here, to the Quirm Watch headquarters, where there will be a little matter of affidavits to sign."
"I expect you will want to be leaving with some haste, Commander,"
said the lieutenant as they strolled along the Rue de Awakening.
"Well, yes," said Vimes. "I'm supposed to be on holiday. I'll pick up young Feeney from the infirmary and find some way of getting back to the hall."
The lieutenant looked surprised.
"And you don't want to get back on the heels of the murderer as soon as possible, sir?"
"Him? I'll see him soon enough. I have no doubt about that. But, you see, even he is not exactly the end of things. Do you play snooker down here?"
"Well, I haven't learned to play, but I understand the game, if that's what you're asking."
"Then you'll know that the ultimate aim of the game is to sink the black, although you'll hit all the other colours during the course of a frame. And you'll bash the red ones again and again, sometimes making use of them to further your strategy. Well, I know where to find the black, and black can't run. The others? The captain is helpfully giving us names and descriptions. If you wish to arrest them yourselves for aiding and abetting the practice of trafficking sapient creatures for profit, then I leave that honour to the Quirm Constabulary." Vimes grinned. "As for me, after I have the affidavits, I intend to go straight back to see my wife and little boy, who I have shamefully, no, desperately neglected over the past few days. And do you know what? Just as soon as I've got there, I'm going to bring them back down here. My wife will enjoy the fresh air, and young Sam will just love the elephants. Oh, won't he just?" The lieutenant brightened up.
"May I suggest then that after dinner you take the overnight boat? It will be the Black-Eyed Suzanne. Quite speedy, like her namesake, according to popular legend. She's due to go upriver in, let me see, 3/4 of an hour. She's very fast, doesn't take much in the way of cargo, so they gear her up high. You'll be home in the morning. How about that? Just time to get yourself smartened up And if you like the idea, then I will get one of the men to go and find the Suzanne's captain and make certain she doesn't leave without you.
Vimes smiled.
What's the weather forecast? Clear skies, Commander, and old treachery is as flat as a mill pond, scoured of every snag and boulder for the rest of the season. It's plain sailing from now on. Good evening, Your Grace.
The voice was somewhat familiar, and Vimes saw, sauntering down the boulevard, what at first seemed like a man wearing a huge cummerbund, until further swift forensic inspection showed that it was the hermit from the hall. His beard was remarkably clean and wrapped around his body, as were two young ladies of the giggling persuasion. Vimes peered at him.
Stump? What are you doing down here?
This caused further giggling.
I'm on holiday, Commander. Yes, indeed. Every man should have a holiday, sir.
Vimes didn't know what to say, and so patted the man on the shoulder and said,
Knock yourself out, Mr. Stump. And don't forget the nourishing herbs.
I think I'm going to need them, Commander.
Say what you like. The food in the Quirm Watch House canteen was pretty damn good, even if they did use a shade too much avec, thought Vimes.
Avec on everything.
Vimes, well fed and cleaned up, and with some very important paperwork stuffed down the inside of his freshly laundered and immaculately ironed shirt, walked with Chief Constable Upshot down the quayside toward the black-eyed Susan. The lieutenant and two of the guards accompanied him to his cabin, where the dwarf butler demonstrated to him the cleanliness of the bed and the crispness of the sheets.
Honored to have you sleeping in them, Commander. You will find that the Susan gives a very smooth ride, although she can sometimes bounce around a little, very much like her namesake, but least said, soonest mended. And, of course, there is a berth next door for Officer Feeney. You gentlemen might like to see the Susan get underway, perhaps?
They did. The Susan had 2 oxen, just like the wonderful Fanny, but with no heavy cargo and only about 10 passengers. She was the express of old treachery. Her paddle wheels, highly geared indeed, left a line of white water all down the valley behind her. "What happens now, Commander?" said Feeney, leaning on the rail as they watched Quirm disappearing in the wake behind them. "I mean, what are we going to do next?" Vimes was smoking a cigar with great pleasure. Somehow this seemed the time and place. Snuff was all very well, but a good cigar had time and wisdom and personality. He would be unhappy to see this one go. "I don't need to do anything now," he said, turning to look at the sunset. "And I don't often see sunsets these days either," he thought. "Mostly I see midnights, and I don't need to chase Stratford either. I know him like I know myself." He mentally paused, momentarily shocked at the implication. Aloud he continued, "You saw those 2 Quirmian officers get on the boat, didn't you? I arranged that. They will, of course, make certain that we have an undisturbed voyage. The crew have also been told that there may be some attempt by a murderer to board the boat. According to the lieutenant, Captain Harbringer can vouch for all of his crew as having sailed with him loyally for many years. Personally, of course, I'll make certain the door to my berth is locked, and I'd suggest you do the same thing, Feeney."
Greed is at the centre of this. Greed and hellish poisons. They're both killers, and greed is the worst by a long way. You know, usually when I'm talking to young officers, such as yourself, I say that in a certain type of case, you should always follow the money. You should ask, who stands to lose? Who stands to gain?
Vimes regretfully tossed the butt of his cigar into the water. Blook!
But sometimes you should follow the arrogance. You should look for those who can't believe that the law would ever catch them, who believe that they act out of a right that the rest of us do not have. The job of the officer of the law is to let them know that they are wrong.
The sun was setting.
I do believe, Commander Vimes, that you have something in you that would turn the wheels of this boat all by itself if a man could but harness it, said Feeney admiringly. And I remember reading somewhere that you would arrest the gods for doing it wrong.
Vimes shook his head.
I'm sure I never said anything of the sort. But law is order, and order is law, and it must be the highest thing. The world runs on it, the heavens run on it, and without order, lad, 1 second cannot follow another.
He could feel himself swaying. Lack of sleep can poison the mind, drive it in strange directions. Vimes felt Feeney's hand on his shoulder.
I'll help you along to your cabin, Commander. It's been a very long day.
Vimes didn't remember getting undressed and into bed, or rather, into bunk. But he clearly had done so, and according to the little bits of white foam on the cabin's tiny wash basin, he had cleaned his teeth as well. He had slept the sleep of the dead, except for the bit where bits fall off and you crumble into dust. All he could recall was cool blackness and, rising now to the surface, a certainty, as if a message had been left in the blackness to await the return of thought.
He is after you, blackboard monitor Vimes. You know this because you recognize what was in his eyes. You know that type. They want to die from the day they are born, but something twists, and so they kill instead. He will find you, and so will I. I hope the three of us meet in the darkness.
As the message drained away, Vimes stared at the opposite wall, in which the door now opened after a cursory knock, to reveal the steward, bearing that which is guaranteed to frighten away all nightmares, to wit, a cup of hot tea. Footnote: the sound of the gentle rattle of china cup on china saucer drives away all demons. A little known fact. End footnote.
No need to get up, Commander,
came the cheerful greeting of the steward as he carefully placed the cup of tea in a little indentation that some foresighted person had designed into the tiny cabin so that said teacup would not slide around.
The captain would like to inform you that we'll be docking in about 20 minutes, although of course you will be welcome to stay aboard and finish your breakfast while we clean the scuppers and take on fresh oxen and, of course, pick up mail and fodder and a few more passengers. In the galley I have today," and here the steward enthusiastically rattled off a menu of belly-stuffing proportions, including, triumphantly, with a bacon sandwich.
Vimes cleared his throat and said gloomily, I don't suppose you have any muesli, do you? After all, Sybil was only 20 minutes away. The steward looked puzzled. Well, yes, we would have the ingredients, of course, but I didn't peg you as a rabbit food man. Vimes thought about Sybil again. Well, perhaps today my little nose is twitching. Luxurious though the cabin was, roomy it was not. Vimes managed to shave with a razor donated by the steward. With the compliments of the captain, Commander. And a thoughtfully placed basin, soap, flannel, and minute towel, which at least helped him to deal with the form of absolution his old mother had called washing the bits that showed. He paid attention to them, nevertheless, taking some pains in the knowledge that this little wooden world would evaporate very soon, and he would be back in the world of Sam Vimes, husband and father. Periodically, however, as he made himself respectable, he turned back to himself in the shaving mirror and said, Fred Cullen! The luxury cabin had turned out to be wonderful to sleep in, although so small that, in reality, it would only be suitable for a fastidious corpse. But eventually, when every part of Vimes he could reach had been decently, if erratically, scrubbed, and the steward had brought him a hermit-sized portion of fruits and nuts and grains, he looked around to see what he might have left behind, and saw a face in the shaving mirror. It was his own, although it must be said the phenomenon is not unusual in shaving mirrors. The Vimes in the mirror said, You know, he doesn't just want to kill you. That wouldn't be good enough for a bastard like that, not by a long way. He wants to destroy you and will try everything until he does. I know, said Vimes, and added, You're not a demon, are you? Absolutely not, said his mirror image. I might be made up of your subconscious mind in a momentary case of muesli poisoning occasioned by a fermenting raisin. Watch where you walk, Commander. Watch everywhere. And then it was gone. Vimes stepped away from the mirror and turned around slowly. It must have been my face, he said to himself. Otherwise, it would have been the other way round, wouldn't it? He walked down the gangway into reality, and what turned out to be Corporal Nobby Nobbs, beyond whom reality does not get much more real.
Good to see you, Mr. Vimes. My word, you're looking fit. Your holiday must be doing you a lot of good. Got any bags?
This was asked in the absolute certainty that Vimes would have no bags, but a show of willing is always worth a try. Is everything all right? Said Vimes, ignoring this. Nobby scratched his nose, and a bit fell off. Oh yes, thought Vimes, I'm back all right.
Well, the usual stuff that happens is happening, but we're on top of it. Could I draw your attention to the hill over there? They were very careful not to harm the trees, and Lady Sybil herself promised a lingering death to anyone who upset the goblins.
Mystified, Vimes scanned the skyline and saw Hangman's Hill.
Hell's bells! It's a Clax Tower! It's a bloody Clax Tower! Sybil will go totally librarian about it.
As a matter of fact, Mr. Vimes, Lady Sybil was all for it by the time she'd read all of Captain Carrot's note. He said this was no time for you to be out of touch.
You know that, sir. Very persuasive officer, which is how come he got the Clacks Company to rush up here toot sweet with a temporary tower. Worked all night, so they did, and got it lined up on the Grand Trunk, sweet as a nut. This time, Nobby picked his nose, briefly inspected the contents for interest or value, and then flicked them away and went on. Only one thing, sir. The Ankh-Morpork Times wants to interview you about how you are a great hero, what saved someone's wonderful Fanny. There was a pause while they waited for Feeney to stop choking with laughter and get his breath back, and then Vimes said, Corporal Nobby Nobs, this here is Chief Constable Upshot. I call him Chief Constable because he's the only law in these parts. That is until now. This is his patch, and so you will respect it, okay? Who else came with you from the smoke?
Sergeant Detritus, Mr. Vimes, but he's up at the hall, guarding her ladyship and young Sam with delicate surreptition.
A part of Vimes had unknowingly been holding its breath. Detritus and Willikins? Together they could face an army. He shook himself. But not Fred Cullen.
No, Mr. Vimes, as I understand it, we were on our way when the second Clacks came through, but I reckon that he'll be here pretty soon.
Gentlemen, I'm going home, said Vimes. But Mr. Feeney, how soon will another boat go down to Quirm?
Feeney beamed.
You're in luck, Commander. The Roberta E. Biscuit will be going tomorrow morning. Just the job for what I think you might want. Big and slow, but you won't mind that because there's gambling and entertainment. Lots of tourists on it. But don't you worry, sir. Your name is big on the river already. Trust me. Say the word, and the captain of the Biscuit will make certain that there's a commander-size stateroom for you. How about that?
Vimes opened his mouth to ask, Is it expensive? And shut it again with the embarrassed realization that the Ramkin fortune could almost certainly buy every vessel on old treachery. Feeney, like the good copper he was becoming, noticed that slight moment of hesitation and said, Your money won't be good on the river, Commander. Believe me. The saviour of the Fanny won't have to buy his own cigars or a stateroom anywhere along old treachery. Nobby Nobbs was almost bent double with laughter and managed to choke out,
The Fanny!
Vimes sighed.
Nobby, her name was Francesca. Fanny for short, understand?
It didn't work with some people. It only just did with Vimes.
And Nobby, I want you to wait here. And as soon as Fred's coach arrives, you're in charge of getting him up to the Goblin Cave on the hill. Okay?
Yes, Mr. Vimes,
said Nobby, looking at his boots.
And Nobby, if you see a goblin who stinks like a latrine and glows slightly blue, well, that's a fellow copper. And don't you forget it.
Sybil was halfway down the lane as Vimes quickly walked up it, and young Sam was running ahead and cannoned into his father's legs, throwing his arms around them as best he could.
Dad, I know how to milk a goat, Dad. You have to pull its teats. Dad, they're all wiggly.
Vimes's expression did not change as young Sam went on.
And I'm learning to make cheese. And I have some badger poo now, and some weasel poo too.
My word, you have been busy, said Vimes. Who told you the word tits, lad?
Young Sam beamed.
That was Willie, the cowherd, Dad.
Vimes nodded.
I'll have a little talk to you about that later, Sam. But first, I think I'll have a word with Willie, the cowherd.
He lifted up young Sam, ignoring a twinge in his back.
I hope that washing your hands played a part in these adventures.
I take care of that, said Lady Sybil, catching up. Honestly, Sam, I let you out of my sight for hardly any time at all, and here you are, a hero again. Really? Honestly, the whole river is talking about it. Fights on a riverboat, maritime chases. Oh dear me, I don't know where to put my face. So if you would be so kind as to let our child down carefully, I'll press said face mightily to yours. When Vimes surfaced for breath, he growled,
It is a really bloody clacks tower, isn't it, yes? And now the Times have got hold of all this, they'll make out I'm some kind of hero. The damn fools!
With the suction released, Lady Sybil said, No, Sam. Well, maybe a little of that, but you would be amazed at how fast news travels along the river. Apparently, you were standing on the wheelhouse roof of the wonderful Fanny, fighting with a murderer, and he shot a crossbow at you, and it bounced off. I'm told there's going to be a large artist's impression in tomorrow's paper. Once again, I won't know where to put my face. And then Sybil couldn't contain herself anymore and burst out laughing. Frankly, Sam, you may have anything you want for dinner tonight. Vimes leaned over and whispered, causing his wife to slap his hand and say, Later, perhaps. At this point, somewhat emboldened, Vimes said, I couldn't help noticing that the bridge is severely damaged. Sybil nodded. Oh, yes, dear. A terrible storm, wasn't it? It took away the entire central arch and all of the 3 disgraces. Footnote. The 3 disgraces were apparently the daughters of blind Io. But you know how people talk. They were Nuditia, Pulchritudia, and Voluptia. End footnote. I remember them from my childhood. My mother used to put her hand over my eyes when we crossed the bridge, and so I took a keen interest in them, especially as one was scratching her bottom. Her smile brightened. But don't worry, Sam. Naked ladies are not difficult to come by. Vimes took comfort from her smile, and a tiny, treacherous suspicion bubbled up once more. He thought he had stamped it down, but the damn thing kept coming back. And so he cleared his throat and said, Sybil, you did discuss plans for my holiday with veterinary, didn't you? Sybil looked surprised. Why, yes, dear, of course. After all, he is technically your superior. Only technically, of course. I had a word with him on the subject at some charity do or other. I can't remember which right now, as there are always so many, but there wasn't any difficulty. He said that it was high time you took a decent rest from your valiant activities. Vimes was wise enough not to utter the words that entered his mouth, and instead said carefully, so he didn't actually suggest that you came down to the Shires? To be honest, Sam, it was quite some time ago. We both have your best interests at heart, as you surely know. We generally discuss the matter, and that's it, really. Vimes left it at that. He would never know for sure. And anyway, the ball had dropped. Later, Samuel Vimes, all of him, had a bath in the huge bathroom with his nose only just above the surface, and came out feeling exactly the same man as before, but at least a lot cleaner. The affidavits were in the strong room, and when the Ramkins design a strong room, it's not a room that you'll get into in a hurry. First, you needed a combination, which opened a smaller but nevertheless dangerously efficient safe. Simply to remove a key, which then had to be inserted in locks hidden in 3 separate clocks in the hall, and each key triggered a clockwork timing mechanism. Sybil told him that she had fond memories of her grandfather running split arse, as the old man called it, down the main hall to get the key into the last lock before the clock controlling the first lock had run down, and certainly before the guillotines dropped. What we have, we keep, Vimes had thought as he tried it out. Well, they definitely meant it. Now he dressed in clothes that didn't smell of fish. What next?